Hello, fellow systematic geekologists. Welcome to another episode of Systematic Geekology. For those out there who know me and what I do here on Systematic Geekology, it's no secret that I'm a huge fan of comic books and graphic novels and that medium of storytelling and creation and world building. And so I'm really excited and stoked for this episode today because I often love to interact with creators of comics at Comic Cons and leading panels and even having them on this show. And so it wasn't that long ago. I was at my local comic book store and I saw a cover and I was like, I got to own that comic. And so I picked up the Savage Strength of Starstorm and started interacting with its creator on social media. And I said, hey, Drew, would you mind coming on our little podcast and YouTube to talk about Starstorm and the creative process? And he agreed. So I am very excited to welcome Drew to Systematic Geekology. And I'm super excited about this. Drew.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome to the show. Drew, where are you today and where you're at and how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm up in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, home base. I'm at my place, which I'm currently packing up because I'm looking to sell to buy a place with my girlfriend. So we're looking. So it's a little bit of in shambles here, but it's warm in here at least. So.
Nice. Yeah, Montreal, a little more north than I am. I'm in North Carolina, but you're further north, but still on the East Coast time. And we interacted on Instagram a little bit, and it's been fun buying your comics and seeing the creative process. And we've been trying to make this interview happen for a little while and getting our schedules together and to line up. And we finally have you today. And so I'm really excited about this because, as I shared, I'm a huge fan of comics and its creative process and how they tell its story and world building. And often in Image Comics, when they have creator owned comics, there's often a letter at the beginning or the end of the comic where the creator shares their kind of story and inspiration of how this comic came to be. And you share in that the Savage Strength of Starstorm is like a love letter to comics. And so I'm really curious about kind of your origin story in comics. Like, what did you read growing up? What was the first comic book you owned? How did you get into this? I know you come from a family of comic book creators. And so, what's your origin story around comics and that medium of storytelling?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just something that it's ever since I can remember. I love comic books. Superheroes. It all stems from superheroes as a kid, like most kids. I loved Superman as a kid. The first movie I remember going to see was the Superman the movie with my mom for my birthday, and it's like a very vivid memory, and just loving that character. And I just love superheroes always, Spider-Man and everything, and just so it just branched off from there, and then. When I was a little kid, we lived in this area of Quebec. It was the South Shore of Montreal, basically, and out there it was little. It's a little more French out there. So the first comics I remember getting were French translation of Marvel comics, and so it was just basically I couldn't read at the time, so just looking at the pictures and loving the artwork and being really struck by that artwork. And the first one I remember getting was like a Human Torch Spider-Man team up, and I think that those are. I mean, it's one of the first ones I remember having, and I think it was maybe I think it might have been John Romita who did the art. I'm not 100%, but it was. I just remember really being struck by the artwork. My mother paints, so and she's an artist as well. So she, I used to give her my comic books and get her to draw Superman for me. She was really good at copying the characters out of my comic books and stuff. I cut them out. Put them on my wall and stuff like that. So it was just always something I loved. Then when I got to be a little bit older, we moved to a more English part of town where there was comic book stores when the boom started. And like all the kids on the block were like really into
80s, 90s, which boom? There's been a couple booms, couple busts. Which booms?
Pardon me?
Yeah, there's been a couple booms, a couple busts. Which one was
Oh
the
yeah.
80s, 90s, early 2000s? Which one
Oh,
that was
oh yeah, it's well the boom, like the 80s boom, when it really, when the comic book shops started opening up, right? So it was like yeah, so we had like several comic book stores in the area, and like yeah, all the cool guys like in on my block, like when I was, I was trying to meet new friends and stuff. They were like, I love comic books already, so everybody was really into comic books. So but all these guys were like serious collectors with their boxes and their collections that they had. So then that's what got me into it, really collecting seriously. And first thing I gravitated towards was like Power Man and Iron Fist. I really liked that combo and those,
yeah.
those characters. And then and then they had like Crisis came out and Secret Wars, and that was like those were huge huge events in comic books at the time. And then the reboot of the DC universe, and like I collected all those those reboots. And so yeah, it's just, I mean, it's just something I always loved. It was and to this day, it's just I mean, I could go on and on. I could talk about it forever, into the Image stuff. And
Yeah.
Todd McFarlane was a big influence, and followed all his Spider-Man stuff. I used to, when I was in high school, I just like would save all my lunch money. Instead of eating lunch, I'd spend it on comic books. There was a little comic book store that was like a walk away from the school. So I just, even in the middle of winter, if it was freezing cold, there was a snowstorm, if it was new comic book day, and especially if like the Amazing Spider-Man was out and McFarlane was on it, I was going through the snowstorm to get it. So I was pretty serious about it, So yeah, so always a love.
Well, you're speaking my language, because that's the same kind of era I grew up reading comics. I was a big X-Men fan, and
Yeah.
I would ride my bike to school from the south end of Wrightsville Beach up to Wrightsville Beach Elementary School, and there's like a little like beach store that had a spinner rack there in the store. And I would use my lunch money to buy a comic and a candy bar. And that's what I was doing for lunch every day. And then until my mom found out that I was spending my money on comics and candy bars, and they stopped that really fast. But I would still save my allowance to go grab whatever on the spinner rack there. So yeah, you're speaking my language for sure. Yeah, so it sounds like you kind of mixed up both Marvel and DC. I liked Batman and Superman, and I would dabble in a little bit of DC, but yeah, I was a Marvel head. I was buying those Spider-Man books and X-Men books, but it sounds like kind of a both and for you. I remember seeing the Superman movie in the theater too, and wanting to fly after that. I was like, who doesn't want to fly after seeing that movie? But yeah, so you kind of mixed up your fandom, kind of went across to all the big two and others.
Yeah, I love it all. I mean, I don't have like someone says, oh, I'm a Marvel or DC. I love all. I mean, it's like, I just love certain runs, so I love like when Todd McFarlane was on Spider-Man, I love that run. And I'm a huge X-Men fan too, like the stuff that Chris Claremont did, especially when I love John Romita Jr.'s artwork. So yeah, so I mean, it's just, I love all of it really, I mean, there's no I don't love one more than the other, it's, and Image Comics as well. I love all the Image stuff. And these days, actually, I read more Image more than anything, because it's all new and you can jump on easily to these stories, so, and the trades are usually, the first trade is usually pretty cheap. It was at that $10 mark, so it's, so it's easy to jump on and check new things out with Image, so, and I find that the stories are more innovative these days. I mean, I haven't really been keeping up with DC and Marvel recently, other than I've been reading the Mark Waid Shazam and Batman Superman stuff. I love Dan Mora's art on that, and it's amazing stuff. So yeah, beautiful artwork. So yeah, so I mean, it's, I mean, I haven't been to because I'm mostly focused on doing my own thing, so it's hard to. I read specific things, and then like, it's not as much, I don't read as much because I'm more writing and drawing these days than I am reading, like I used to. So, yeah, I'm not consuming quite as much, but I mean, I'm at the comic book store at least a couple times a month, so I still do read quite a bit, but not as much as when I was growing up, because it takes up too much time away from my own writing, my own storytelling, so.
Sure. Yeah, use that time and resources wisely for sure. Be a good steward of that.
Yeah.
So how McFarlane like eventually creates and one of the creators of Image and kind of that creator owned book and autonomy there away from the big two. Did you imagine yourself one day that you would create a comic that was created on the Image? I mean, was this something that you're like, one day I'm going to be a comic book artist and writer? Is that something you look to or just kind of fall in your lap or eventually progress to that? Like how did that happen?
No, it didn't fall in my lap. That's for sure. I've been wanting to do this for quite some time, but I'm a bit of a procrastinator. So it was like, well, I mean, it was always something that was on the radar that I wanted to do. It was you know, a childhood dream. You know, there was a time when I drifted away from it, and then you know, I came back to it. I was like, this is something I love, you know, and this is like something that I am. I'm an artist and a writer and a storyteller, I feel. And I'm only really good at like maybe two things in this world lifetime, and that's in this world. It's one of it's drawing, and the other one's maybe telling some cool stories and creating some cool characters, and another one's boxing, but that's something else completely different. But yeah, so that's you know, this is my focus. This is my love, you know. So yeah, it's yeah. So that's, I mean, it was always on the radar. I remember as a kid thinking, oh, you can draw comic books as a career, you know. So that was like a huge epiphany, you know. When I found that out, I was like, wow, that's amazing. So you know, my brother Wes is a comic book creator as well, and he's pretty popular, and so he's a very diligent worker, and he's my younger brother, and but I was going to ask. Pardon me?
As I was going to ask, younger brother or older brother, right? Yeah.
He's my younger brother. I'm like a little bit like the older, crazier brother. So he's
right.
So he's like, I'm a little more, how would I put it? A little more scatterbrained, and he's a little more like focused. Like, he's a very driven guy. He's very focused. And something I learned from him when he got in and started working comic books full time is the amount of dedication, the amount of hard work it is. Like, you know, sometimes in life you think that things just fall in your lap, and it doesn't usually happen that way. You know, you have to work at your craft if anything you want to do, right? So so I learned from him that you know, you gotta really sit down and really knuckle down and work hard, because it won't fall into your lap unless you do that, you know. So so yeah, so I you know, I just started really like I created Starstorm, and I created an ash can. I brought it to Comic-Con. I had a couple of like editors' feedbacks, and then I pitched it to Image, and they decided to publish it, and it was a dream come true. So that was, you know.
I love that. Yeah, I have some friends who have story ideas and artists who would love to get into the business. And you know, I reading comics so long. There's a couple stories in my head and characters I'd love to get on the spinner rack one day. But I think you start there with the love of the craft of the storytelling first, before you think about like franchising it and making millions of dollars off of it, because that's not going to happen. It's like, what's your love of story first, and then go from there and put in your hours and those kinds of things. I think is pretty important. So yeah. So all right. I'm very curious. I'm very curious about the origins of Starstorm. Like, first of all, just to get this question out of the way, because I ask it all the time, how long did it take from the story in your head until you got it on the local comic book store, the spinner rack or whatever? Like, is this like a 20-year process? Is it like, all right, I'm pitching it to Comic-Con, some creators there, and then it took a little while, like from idea to like in your hand? How long was that process?
Well, I'm embarrassed to say it probably took me about 20 years. You know,
yeah.
Well, I mean, I had the initial idea. I mean, originally how it started, I've told this story before on several podcasts, but originally how it started is that there's me and my family went to Hampton Beach one year for vacation, and my dad was playing like one of those boardwalk games where you can win prizes, and he won me a t-shirt, and on the t-shirt it was like an 80s style t-shirt with like these little 80s video game graphics. They were all like pixelated little cubes and stars and diamonds, and on the t-shirt it said Starstorm. And then I created kind of like a cosplay of Starstorm, this character. I made myself like a mask and you know, I had like black pajama bottoms and stuff. And so that's initially how the character started. And then I started just drawing him as a comic book. My brother took the character over with his own comic books for a time, and then I was like, well, okay, I want him back. And then I I redesigned them several times, and then I just I was working on several different story ideas, and then I kind of just decided to fold them all into one universe and just do like my own sort of like my homage to Stan and Jack, my own like Marvel universe, you know, just create my own universe of heroes and villains, and just I'm like really pretty prolific at designing characters. So I just had a ton of character designs and a ton of ideas for characters, and I just merged them all into one universe and just decided to just create my own universe of superheroes. And you know, so that's how it initially started, was that T-shirt, but then it just gradually evolved, and then I like the stories I'd written were like, okay, I'll just fold them in together. And then I guess the initial, I'm trying to think like when I sat down and drew the first issue, but it's at least, I'd say I started probably maybe 10 years ago, like just thinking about it and getting it rolling, you know? So,
Okay.
yeah. So, I mean, it's been a while. It's been jumping around in my head for a long time.
I love that, because yeah, we have characters in our head that we create, the characters we love, and then characters in our head that we don't mind creating one day. And the fact that it came from like a 80s, right now would be retro. Then it was like super cool and in, but now retro's come back circle, like the video
Yeah.
games, stand-up cabinet games, all this stuff
Yeah.
is totally in. That Starstorm was born in your head from that T-shirt. That's such a good story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And so,
I was thinking, because I did a design, of Starstorm the way I was dressed as a kid, and I was thinking about bringing in a character. Eventually, will come in. It's going to be Starstorm, but it's going to be my cosplay kid version of Starstorm. He's going to be
okay.
somewhat
Yeah.
like another dimensional Starstorm character. So he'll come in further down the line as I go with the story. But yeah, so it's an idea I'm going to run with. I think it'll be kind of cool. He's going to be kind of like a Mitsoplick trickster character, Loki sort of character, you know. So yeah,
Love it.
something about incorporating him. Yeah, yeah. So anyway.
So the first story arc, so you're on board to do more storytelling, like Image is ready to go. Your first graphic novel's coming out in April, but you have more stories they're willing to, like, all right, let's keep this thing going.
Yeah, well, I mean, the sales dropped off. Sales like started high, as they do, and they dropped. So now when the trade comes out in April, I'm hoping that enough people pick up the trade where Image will be wanting to continue with the story. I'm going to do it regardless of what happens, whether I do it through Kickstarter,
Yeah.
self-publishing, or whatever. I'm hoping Image does want to publish them. We'll have to wait and see. I haven't gotten 100% let's go with it. So I got to wait and see. I'm hoping the trade does well, and then I'm going to take it from there. But I'm doing them anyways, you know. So we'll see what
That's
happens.
the thing about artists and creators today is, yeah, you can kickstart, you can self-publish, you can do those things. And yeah, there's big publishing companies, but it's cool that you own your own work. This is,
Yeah,
from Image, this is your creator, your character, your story. So even
yeah,
if they're like, no, we're gonna move on, you can like, well, I'm gonna kickstart this. I got enough people that follow my stuff that I'm gonna get this done and keep
yeah,
this story going for the self.
yeah.
The actual story starts in space with the villain and that cool first couple splash page of all these ships heading towards Earth.
Mm,
And then it is a throwback to a lot of like things that I love and pick up on, like Grant Morrison. The
mm,
character's name is what? Grant Garrison,
yeah,
and goes to Kirby High, and there's some Kirby crackles all over this book.
yeah.
Yeah, was that kind of you? That's super intentional on your
All right.
part to throw all that stuff. What were you just having fun with all these things, or you're like, how can I do this and share this with my love of comics?
Yeah, it's just like all that mixture of pop culture influences, you know, and like it's all jumping around in my head, and obviously, you know, Jack Kirby is the primary influence. You know,
Sure.
he was a big inspiration for Starstorm, like his designs and his creativity. Really, like the amount of characters that he created the Marvel universe pretty much,
Yeah.
and so much
Hmm.
for DC as well. And I mean, it's just his level of creativity is really what I admired, and his how dynamic his storytelling was. But when I was a kid, I collected I was a big Superpowers fan, so the Superpowers cartoon in the 80s, and he
Yeah.
was on the Superpowers comic book. But at that time, I was not a fan. I did not like his blocky anatomy, and I like when I was young, I was like, no, and everybody was telling me how much of a genius he was. The kids who were older and knew more about comic books at the time than I did. And I was like, no, it's not good. I don't like it. But then, as you get older and your tastes mature and you start to understand, the medium a little bit more, you know, I love him now. He's like, you know, he's the guy, you know what I mean? He's the king. So, I mean, really, yeah, so it's a big, you know, it's a love letter to that. It's a lot of things, but really Jack Kirby, I never met him. So, you know, I wish I could have, but
Right.
it is like, you know, he's a huge, I mean, the Steve Ditko as well, his designs, his sort of crazy wonky designs. I love that sort of stuff. I love stuff that, like, I like to create, for some reason, I like to create hard things for me to draw, you know, like I like to design suits that are like difficult to draw in every panel, you know. So but yeah, I love that sort of design stuff, that crazy sort of wonky you know, ethereal design stuff, like Doctor Strange and Spider-Man. Like, oh, let's put, you know, a bunch of webs on this guy's costume and just, you know, make it impossible to draw, like, you know.
Well, that brings me to like the book itself, the first issue. Like the second issue moves on. There's more. There's a world there of different teams, and it's not
Mhm.
just kids reading comics in high school, but there's like you allude to the fact that there are superheroes in this universe. There are
Yeah.
teams out there, and you get to see kind of that unfold in the second issue and on. Even
Mhm.
zombies show up. I love the zombie genre, but then, but in this, like, there's a splash page of when Grant gets like this mysterious weapon that armors him up and spaces him. You know, he storms
Mhm.
up
Yeah.
for this thing. That page of him armored up with the hundreds of faces around him
Mhm.
was so impressive. How long did it take you to draw that? And is that was something always in your head you're going to get to, or is that inspired as the story comes along?
It's sort of like, I mean, part of the book is an homage to Crisis on Infinite Earths, you know, with Marv Wolfman and George Perez, right? So I always love that cover of it's the blue cover with all the
Mhm.
faces that are blending together, and the
Yeah.
planets are, you know, so it's somewhat of an homage to that. That was probably jumping around in the back of my head, and but it's just, I don't know. Sometimes it just floats to me, you know, and I'm just like, oh, this is going to look cool. And I'm like, okay, well, I want to show people like I have a big universe to reveal, you know, that's going to, you know, go on, you know. So I'm going to show this in the first issue. Like, this is what's coming up, is these characters will come in down the road, you know. So it's sort of like, you know, this is what's yeah, that's what it is. That page is an homage to that cover,
Love it.
and then it's just also like a reveal of like, okay, these are characters that are going to come into play down the road, you know. So yeah, so I mean, I don't remember like the exact, like how I came up with the idea, if that was even like a conscious thought that it was going to be an homage to that cover, but it was just in the back of in the subconscious somewhere. And then when I was drawing, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll just do a bunch of, I wanted to have him like, you know, star storming up, and then, you know, like, oh, I'll put a bunch of, you know, it might have just started out with that, and then, oh, I'll just put all the faces of the characters I want to use down the road and in the background, and that'll be something impressive for people to see, you know. So so that was like probably my thought process at the time.
I loved it. And it was one of those things like, it's connected to a large universe, but I couldn't help but think, it's like, are these former star storms? Are they current star storms in the universe? Are they a part of this legacy? So that teaser draw me in. That's why I love
Yeah,
comics. It shows you like the final page reveal to make you want to read the next one, but also within the book, the mystery and the lore that keep you reading about a large
yeah,
universe is what draws you into that. So yeah,
yeah.
no, I don't want to give away spoilers, but like, yeah, some of those faces stare back at you. Are there ideas with each of those people, or something later on that you hope to pan out in volume 5?
Yeah, there's I mean, some of them are villains, some of them are heroes, some of them are gods. There's a, you know, I have like my own sort of like my Lords of Order and Chaos, and like I'm influenced by Michael Moorcock novels as well, and the Elric saga, and the
Nice.
Eternal Champion stuff. So there's going to be parts that are paying homage to that as well, and yeah, so it's just I mean, you'll have to pick up the comic book and find out,
That's
you know. So, but
right.
yeah,
That's what we
that's, I
want
mean,
you to
that's
do.
what it is. Some of them are other world, like other dimensional characters. As Starstorm jumps around in time a little bit, he'll be going like all over the place in different dimensions and time and places, and yeah, so it's like, yeah, yeah, so it's, yeah, you're just gonna, I mean, even like I'll look at a character, I'll be able to tell you a little bit about the story, but I haven't fully fleshed out every detail of every character yet. But I mean, they're loosely fleshed out in my mind, you know. I could sit down and like figure it out as we talk about it, you know. So Yeah.
I love
So
that. I
that's it.
love that. And I'm sure like your involvement with boxing and MMA, like in terms of action shots and how
Mm.
the body works. I mean, I'm sure that helps in terms of like how you're showing these fights pop on the page.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different because I've studied also like cinematic choreography for fighting and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
like say MMA and boxing, it can be a little more how to put it, not refined, but restrained. It's not as dynamic as someone throwing a big punch. When you throw a punch in boxing, you're just going boom like this. You're not
Yeah.
trying to overextend, but in comic books you want to have that big dynamic, like that fist coming at you. So it's
Mhm.
a little bit different, there's yeah, so because you exaggerate movement to make it more dynamic looking, right? So that's what you're trying to do. And in actual fighting, you don't want to exaggerate movements because if you miss, you're in trouble. So
That's right.
so
That's right. Don't
so a
wanna
little
overextend.
different,
There's
yeah.
something I clicked on one, like, video on one social media of, like, someone getting knocked out in 2 seconds, and I was like, "Oh my
Mm.
gosh," and so now that algorithm's in my phone, and I get a
Oh,
lot of videos of people getting knocked out, of, like, being too cocky and putting their hands
ooh,
down and yell at the
yeah.
other person, they get knocked out. I now love those videos.
Oh
I
yeah.
that's part of my watching, I'm not like a violent person, but man,
Mm.
seeing some, the karma of someone being too cocky
Yeah,
and it coming
i
back to haunt
I
them.
enjoy it as well.
It's
Yeah,
very
yeah,
satisfying.
yeah, yeah.
Well,
It's
in terms of your creative process, if there are other creators out there or wannabe creators out there who wanted this, do you have any advice for them in terms of, words of wisdom of how to get started or where they are now or to keep their head up? Like what are some things you've learned in this many years of ideas to page to now trying to keep the story going? What advice would you give?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like anything in life. You just got to keep grinding away, and you just can't
Mhm.
ever quit. You just keep moving forward. You keep drawing. I went to Comic Cons. I've been going to them for about, I guess, over 20 years now. And I remember me and
Yeah.
Wes would go and we'd sit in the panel on how to get to comic books, how to get into comic books. And they tell you got to draw. If you want to be a comic book artist, you got to draw every day. And they're right. You got to draw every day. You got to like really. If you can't draw every day, you got to draw when you can.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. So yeah, you just got to be persistent and just keep moving forward. And keep working at your craft and keep trying to become a better storyteller, a better artist. And I mean, that's really all you can do. That's in your hands. And then going and networking and meeting people and meeting editors and stuff
Yeah.
like that. That's
Mhm.
a part of it as well, and getting your name out there, and but the most important part is just the work. The work is the most important part. And even myself, I'm still trying to get better. Like I'm
Yeah.
nowhere near where I'd like to be artistically and storytelling wise. I'm trying to get better every day and just try to keep at it, and that's it. I think that's the best advice. I mean, for anything in life, really, you gotta work hard, right? So, and that's it's an
Yeah.
important thing, So yeah, and that's
Gotta
it.
put in your 10,000 hours. I think
Yeah.
that's a part of it. And then I do like see the evolution. Even Jack Kirby and Jim Lee and John Byrne, you see their early work,
Mm.
John Romita Jr., like you see their
Yeah.
early work and then you see their later work, and in between, everybody evolves as a person and as an
Yeah.
artist and as a creator. And it's not like one's better than the other. Like you're just growing as a person, have a different
Yeah.
style. I'm not the
Hmm.
same person I was 10, 20, 30 years ago and that kind of thing. I think that's important to remember too. Yeah, for this upcoming season of Lent, I'm going to be intentional. I have a book in my head of like the philosophy and theology of surfing, and I'm going to write every day during the season of Lent. Like whether it's one sentence or a paragraph or the muse hits, and I write
Yeah.
like 4 chapters. I'm going to at least make sure that I do it every single day. I'm tired of it being an idea. I'm like, I'm going to one day do this. Like, no,
Mm.
I'm going to, for 40 days, I am going to sit down
Mm.
and write every single day. And so I think you having those blocks and being intentional about it and
Mm.
purposeful about it, I think is super important. So yeah,
Yeah. Well, if you
100%.
sit around and wait for inspiration, you can be sitting around forever,
Yeah.
So and I used to be like that. I used to be like, "Oh, I'm not inspired, and I'm not in the mood, and that sort of stuff. And you got to kind of work past that, and just be like, it doesn't matter if you're inspired. No one cares, just sit down and do it. Do something, draw something, you know what I mean? Like find
Yep.
something to do. I'm a little, like I said, I'm a little scatterbrained, a little maybe ADD, I can find a lot of distractions, but
Yeah.
I try to get through that and just sit in a chair and draw, and sometimes you got to force yourself to do it. And it's not the most comfortable stuff, but nothing great comes from being comfortable, unfortunately.
Oh,
A
yeah.
lot of
Amen
times,
about that.
so
Yeah,
yeah.
like when I see like the classic novelists or people from way back when who created all this stuff, I'm like, well, that's before Netflix, that's before streaming, that's before social media. Of course, they were just sitting around with their own thoughts. They had time to sit around. I was like, but
Yeah.
I'm sure everybody has distractions, everybody has excuses. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
just sit down and block it out and do it. So I think
Yeah.
you're right. Yep.
Yeah, all those cliches are true. It's all the cliched, all the Rocky lines, they're all true. It's just you just gotta work, and that's it, so yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
what do you think is like the current state of comics? Like I on one hand, I think we talked about the different decades and the eras and the ages, and they've all had their heights and their booms and their busts and then come back around. I don't think this medium of storytelling is going anywhere. People love pictures and iconography and art and letters and stories. A good story is not going anywhere, but like
Yeah.
how people create and what people do has definitely changed, and how you
Yeah.
come out of how you make money off this thing or a living is the thing. But
Mm.
what's your take, as someone in the business? What's the
Mm.
current state of comics, and is it healthy? Is there something that we could do to make it better, or what? As someone who's out there hustling, what's your thing?
Yeah, I feel it's easier for a person like me. Like we don't have to live in New York City, and be around the hubs anymore, because of
Right,
the internet, so it's good for that, that's good. The state of comics, I mean, comic cons are a huge thing now, but they're more of a pop culture
right,
con, right? They're more
mhm,
pop culture cons, so not, people don't necessarily go there for the comic books, but there are a lot of comic book fans still. I feel like personally, I feel like it's a thing that'll ebb and flow. Like it might dip and then it comes back, and then it's, but I mean, it's like we said, there's a lot of other distractions out there. Kids these days aren't as into comic books as the kids in my day or in your day, probably, right? So
right, right,
so it's not it's not as big as it was back then. They don't sell like hotcakes anymore. More comic books are more like a vehicle for other things to branch off from comic books, right? Like video games and toys and movies and stuff like that. It seems like, but there are the fans of the art. But I mean, I feel that a lot of the fans are guys our age or people our age, and then like they pass it on to their kids, so I think it'll always be around. I think it's storytelling, and as long as the stories are good, then it'll stick around, so I mean, they're just I mean, even before comic books, they're myths, they're
right.
gods and monsters and all that sort of stuff, so it'll always be around in some form, whether it's an actual physical comic book or online, or it's always going to be around some way. I prefer the old school way. I'm an old school guy, so I like the physical comic book. I like going to the comic book store. I like talking
Yeah,
about comic book at the comic book store. And, I even missed, like, my first experience buying comic books was the spinner rack at the, we call them Depeners up here, but they're 7-Elevens in the States, right? So
yep,
it's,
yep,
I miss those days. And I think that they should in some way get back to having spinner racks and getting in the faces of the kids, so like, somehow I always feel like that was sort of like when it became like just into the comic book stores, and they became a little too exclusive, and like people, like
right.
some people would be like a little bit intimidated to go in the comic book store if they didn't know everything about comic books. It seemed like, when I was younger. So I felt like there was like that took away a little bit maybe from like the sales potential, of comic books, so, but I mean, it's just figuring out a way of getting it in people's hands and getting in front of like the kids, and because it's, that's how it continues, is that the next generation, if they come up with comic books, it'll continue. If not, then it'll die out, so
Yeah,
What's
kind of
it?
akin to music, right? Like music, vinyl, tape, CD.
Mm.
You had the
Yeah,
music stores, and then now vinyl is kind of classic at the vinyl stores. People going
yeah.
back and kind of vintage and retro, and going back and getting their vinyl. It's making a
Mhm.
comeback. The local comic book stores, the single floppies and the graphic novels, is there. I like it that on this show and others they'll say like, oh, did you like that movie? Did you like that show? Do you like
Mm.
Umbrella Academy? Well, guess what? There's a whole
Yeah,
book about it, and guess who wrote it? It's like,
yeah, yeah.
go get that graphic novel, the new Supergirl movie that James Gunn is getting ready to put out. That was my
Mhm.
favorite story of last year of
Yeah, yeah.
Milkweed
I'm
and
actually in the
King.
middle of reading it.
Gorgeous book.
Yeah,
And I
beautiful.
kept just saying, "Guys, I don't collect Supergirl. I haven't in a long time.
Mm.
I haven't really cared, but man, this book is absolutely incredible." I was just telling everybody about it. And then when they announced how it's becoming a movie, I cannot
Yeah,
wait when people were like, "What? This movie?" I'm like, "Yeah, before you see the movie, please read this book and just
yeah,
put it
yeah,
in people's hands."
yeah,
That's still there. I don't think like you're right that the hero's journey, the stories that hold up a mirror to the human condition and the all questions we all wrestle with is super relevant and not going to go anywhere. And
yeah.
this is just a way of sharing those stories. So
Yeah,
yeah, I
that's it.
appreciate that you're in that game and a part of it. So
No, thank you.
cool stuff. Well, what other products do you have coming up? I mean, are there other ideas you can stay in the Starstorm universe? What does
Yeah,
that look like? You mentioned a little bit about the Kickstarter or image, kind of down the road, but yeah, how's your work life now with these big story
yeah.
arcs?
Well, I mean, I'm working on the next story arc of Starstorm. I also have I have several different characters that I'm developing, and I keep mentioning this story. Me and my brother came up with this story a couple of years back. It's like sort of a homage to like 80s teen flicks mixed in with like some sort of supernatural aspects to it, and like sort of like Goonies mixed with like a little bit like a skater
Oh,
punk style, Stranger Things sort of deal. So yeah, so that would be like a 6-issue miniseries, and I'd really like to try to get that done, but it's difficult with him working on his own stories, like his
right.
own comic book Kaya, and me working on Starstorm, just getting it together. But I think what I might do is I'm just gonna do like maybe a panel a day just to warm up, and then just maybe post that online, and maybe do it as like an online, like an Instagram comic
Nice.
sort of thing, and
Yeah.
just see how that goes. So yeah, that's what I've been thinking about. I was thinking about that the other day, and I think I'm gonna move forward with that, and yeah, we'll see what happens. But I'd like to get it published as well. That would be better, But we'll
Teaser.
see.
Get
Yeah.
some teasers out there and interest in that. Yeah. So yeah, I was gonna ask, like, you and your brother ever thought about teaming up? Is that something good, or you guys keep things separate, or you're like, I know my brother and I were kind of like, okay, maybe we could team up on some things we couldn't. He's a chef, so there's no way he wants me in the kitchen with him.
Yeah,
But
it's it's a little bit of the same thing. It's like we're both kind of like control freaks. Like I told him this story, and then he wrote this whole treatment for the story, but it was a little too morbid. And I was like, and I'm a little more like, I don't want it to be a downer. I want it to be more of an upbeat story. So I was reading his version, and it's in his, not to say his version wasn't great. He's really great storyteller as well. He's awesome, but it was just like the sensibilities were a little bit off. Like I
right,
was like, hey, this isn't what I'm going for. I'm going like more in this direction. So, and then he's a bit of a control freak, and I'm a bit of a control freak. So it was like we were butting heads on it a little bit. And
yeah,
then so he's like, well, you just go your way with it. And I'm like, no, we're going to do this together, but we just have to come to
yeah,
we have to concede a little bit to each other. You know what I mean? So I got to go a little bit in his direction. He's got to come a little bit in my direction, and we'll meet in the middle, and hopefully it'll take off from there. So, I mean, I'd love to have him draw it, but I think he's just too busy. He's just too
yeah,
swamped. He's a busy guy. So, and he's highly sought after. So I'd
sure.
love to have him draw it, but yeah, I'm thinking maybe we might have to find someone else illustrate it. But I mean, I might do it in my spare time. We'll see what happens. I'm not 100%. It's still kind of up in the air, so we'll see.
Yeah, that's super fun. I appreciate that. Any kind of teamwork is like you said, is things that are easy probably aren't worth doing, and so
Yeah,
that means you guys care about it, and that's
yeah.
that care will carry it forward. So yeah, I look forward to that. That's super fun, and we'll definitely keep promoting your work and sharing it on our socials, and yeah, we just love this aspect of storytelling. Well, I thought we would do a lightning or starstorm round of
Okay.
some questions to see what's going on with what you like. All right.
Okay.
All right, Drew. What if you we're gonna have one go-to snack? You're hungry. What's your go-to
Yeah.
snack?
Pizza.
Pizza.
Yeah. I mean, I'm gluten intolerant, but I found a really good gluten-free crust, and I'm back on pizza. Yeah,
Dang.
that's my yeah, yeah.
Beautiful. All right. So, what do you do for fun when you're not doing comics or working or moving to a new house?
What do I do for fun? Draw. No, I. What do I
Yeah.
do? I hang out with my friends, my girlfriend, and we go to movies. Well, I mean, my favorite thing really probably is going to the movies with my friends and my girlfriend. So yeah, I love the movies. I love stories. So that probably that, and I like getting together with well, my dad and stuff. We go watch boxing and stuff
Fun.
like that. So yeah, I do that. Yeah, that's probably going to the movies is probably my go-to or
What
watching the fights.
What's a movie this past year that you're like, if you haven't seen this movie, you got to go see it?
The past year that I saw, which one did I really like? Uh, well, Dune was 2 years ago, eh? So
Right.
that's the one I'm looking forward to next.
Mhm.
Well, I keep trying to go see it. I haven't seen it, but I've heard so many good things about it. I want to see Godzilla -1. So I gotta see it, and it's like I'm just there's just nowhere close to go
Unbelievable.
see it.
It is absolutely amazing. Yeah, I was like, "Oh, I think I'm gonna go see that movie." And then a friend of mine was like, "Will, if you don't go see this movie and do an episode about it, what are you doing? Why are you living?" I'm
Yeah,
like, "Okay." So we did it, and we did an episode on it, and we put up the banner on our YouTube page of just Godzilla -1 chasing the boat, and it says Godzilla -1. It has a lot of clicks, a lot of views, but I'm wondering if people think they're getting the movie for free on YouTube, and they're just like,
yeah,
"Okay,
yeah,
let's get a lot of." I'm like, "Well, that's not us, just us talking about." But yeah, it is absolutely amazing.
yeah.
And I'm
I
glad that
tried
people are
streaming it,
recognizing
but yeah, I gotta go see it in the theater. I want to see like
it.
I
Mhm.
wanted to see the IMAX. There's an IMAX like close by where I live, and I wanted to see it, but they're not playing in the IMAX over here. So, but I'd love to. I wish they'd release it in the IMAX because I think that would be just like the best way to see it for sure.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah,
good stuff. All right, if you could have one superpower, not Superman, not like someone with a ton of powers, but if you could have just one superhuman ability, superpower, what would it be?
Jedi mind trick.
There you go.
I always said, yeah, Jedi mind trick would be just to
Absolutely.
influence people. Keep publishing my comic books. Or
Keep buying
something.
my comics, keep
But
publishing.
yeah, but it works on
There is
all
an
minds,
out. Like
not
you
just
could
I don't want just the weak-minded. I want to work it like, well, I'd be like Professor X, I'd be,
there you go.
yeah. So I think that would be the
That
best.
works. Yeah,
Yeah.
there is something when people say like, "What's your one superpower?" Like you could say like a force wielder because there's a lot that goes with that. It's one thing, but
Yeah.
yeah, you could do a lot with the force.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jedi force use
Yeah.
is
So
pretty
yeah, if I could have
lethal.
used the force, I'd use the force. Yeah. Other than when I was a kid, it was super strength, right? You just wanted to be stronger than
Yeah.
everybody. But as you get older, yeah, I'll take the force.
Yeah, it's interesting how our strength and how that way, and then we're like we want to go to mind, be smarter,
Yeah.
use our brain
Yeah.
better. There is something with that.
Yeah.
Okay, if I think I know the answer to this, but we'll see. If you could have a meal, coffee, or a beer, or a gluten free pizza with one creator, dead or alive, who would that be?
Jack Kirby.
There you go. I knew it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can see it in your work. Even when I devise that question and ask other people, when I saw like the Kirby crackles and saw your work, I'm like, yeah, I think I know where
Yeah.
we're going with that. That's so
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an easy one.
Yep, yep, I'm with you. All right, so a little softball question here: are aliens real, and if so, will we encounter them in our lifetime?
I don't think I'll ever encounter aliens in my lifetime. Are aliens real? Definitely, potentially.
Yeah.
Definitely, there's a definite potential. I had a theory that aliens that have been perceived on Earth are time travelers, and they're just future versions of ourselves that have come back to look in on how crazy we are in these times
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
observe.
my wife said the same thing. We're big space buffs and cosmology and sci-fi, and I think we think about that stuff and ask those questions all the time. And when these like kind of Navy ships are viewing these UFOs or whatever, she's like, I that it might just be us with the
Yeah, yeah,
technology going back. And I'm like, yeah,
yeah,
you're not far off. I mean, there could be intergalactic sanctions where, you know, where the prime directive where you don't talk to those guys until they're ready or
yeah.
before they blow themselves up. But the there is something about like there's something mysterious there that perhaps we maybe it's us.
Yeah,
Trying to
I
create
don't
some
know.
things.
I don't know. That's my
It's hard to
theory.
look
That's
at
my
the
best
size.
theory. That's what I'm running with. Now 10 years from now it might be something different, but yeah, that's my
And
theory.
with your book, you know, like other species coming this way, and you know what person doesn't want to get like a mystical or a cool technology weapon and being asked to fight the powers of evil of the greater threat to the universe? You know, I don't think that's too far fetched.
No,
All
yeah,
these movies and stuff could be soft disclosure to try to get us ready for what's coming. I'm sure.
yeah, yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. I mean, it would be cool. It'd be like my childhood dream. Wow, there are aliens, and we get to, get it. I hope they're nice.
I know. There was a time
Yeah,
when people didn't know dinosaurs existed, and they were like, "Whoa, okay, here we are."
yeah,
There might be a time when, like, my grandkids or great grandkids are like, "Yeah, my great granddad had no clue about aliens, but we do. We're
yeah,
part of the intergalactic council and or whatever." So you never
yeah.
know. We'll see.
I have an
I'm open to
inkling.
it.
I think they're more like along the show V, the television show V from the 80s.
Yeah, yeah,
I
good
think they're going
call.
to do something like that. So we might be in trouble. So we
Yeah,
better get
they might.
ready.
If they come in peace and don't want to eat
Yeah,
us for dinner, that's
we
the
can only,
thing.
yeah, we can only hope.
Cool. Well, friends, thanks for tuning in to this episode, and Drew, thanks for being a part of this and open to the conversation. We'll keep promoting your work. How can people find you and contact you? How can people find you out there in the world?
Mostly through Instagram, Drew Craig Art. Just go to my Instagram page and you can message me there if you want some commissions done or anything like that. If
Nice.
you have any questions about even like breaking into the industry, or if you want any tips or pointers or anything like that, I'm all ears, and do what I can to help anybody out. And yeah, I appreciate you having me on the show, and it was a pleasure. And yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Drew. And yeah, everyone out there, smash the like button, share with a friend, subscribe. Got lots of stuff on our Patreon and different socials out there. And then interact in the comments and let us know what you're reading, what you're geeking out on, and the books that you're reading and the state of the comic book industry. We love having these conversations because, like we said, stories, the hero's journey, comics, I don't think is going anywhere, and we're going to keep promoting the good stuff that is out there, like Drew's work. So, all right, folks. Thanks for listening. And remember to share the faith and share the geek.
Thanks.